There comes a time in every believer's life when heaven grows quiet. You pray, but there is no reply. You search for answers, yet the only thing you hear is your own heartbeat in the dark. And in that stillness, doubt begins to whisper. Maybe you've asked yourself, did God forget about me? Did I do something wrong? Why do I feel so alone when I'm trying to do everything right? If you've ever felt that way, you're not the first. You're standing in a long, sacred line of people who learn to trust God not in the thunder of His voice, but in the quiet of His silence. Abraham waited 25 years for a promise. Joseph spent more than a decade in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Moses wandered in the desert for 40 years before setting foot in the land of promise. David hid in caves, hunted like an animal, after being anointed as king. Even Jesus, the Son of God, cried out from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And heaven said nothing. Silence is one of the hardest lessons in faith. We are a people who want answers, explanations, signs. We want God to speak in the way we expect, loud, clear, immediate. But God's voice doesn't always thunder. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes, He stops speaking altogether, not because He has nothing to say, but because He's already said what you need to know. The silence of God is not a sign of His absence. It's a test of your trust. It's the moment when your faith graduates from believing in what you hear to believing in who He is. Because when you don't hear His voice, you have to learn to trust His heart. Think about Abraham. God promised him a son, a lineage as countless as the stars. But years went by. Then decades. Every morning, Abraham looked at the empty tent beside him where a child should have been, and heaven said nothing. Yet he built altars. He worshipped. He waited. And one night, when the silence was so deep it could almost be touched, God broke it, not with thunder, but with a whisper of fulfillment. Sarah laughed as she held her newborn son, and the sound of that laughter was proof that heaven's silence had never meant abandonment. When God is silent, He's not punishing you. He's preparing you. Look at Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, sold as a slave, thrown into a prison cell for years. He must have prayed night after night, asking, "Why, God? What did I do to deserve this?" And for years, there was no answer. Just darkness. Just waiting. But one day, that same silence turned into revelation. The Pharaoh had a dream no one could explain, and suddenly, Joseph was remembered. In one day, he went from the prison to the palace, from forgotten to fulfilled. And when his brothers later stood before him, terrified, Joseph could finally say, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." You see, the silence was never empty. It was filled with divine purpose. Sometimes, God's silence is not about your prayer being denied, it's about your heart being developed. If God answered too soon, your faith would remain too small. If He gave you everything you asked for right away, you would mistake His gifts for His presence. But when you wait, really wait, when you pray and there's no sound, no sign, no movement, and yet you still choose to trust, something extraordinary happens inside of you. You begin to love God not just for what He does, but for who He is. That is mature faith. That is real relationship. Let's talk about Job, a man who lost everything. His children, his wealth, his health. He sat in ashes, scraping his wounds, asking God, "Where are you?" For 37 chapters of the Bible, heaven remains silent. 37 chapters of pain, questions, and confusion. And then, God speaks. But He doesn't explain Himself. He doesn't give Job the why. He simply says, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?" In other words, Job, you don't need to understand everything to trust me. And that was enough. Because faith doesn't need all the answers. It just needs the assurance that the one who holds the answers is still in control. Maybe your silence isn't punishment, it's protection. You prayed for that door to open, and it didn't. You begged for that person to stay, and they left. You asked for that opportunity, and it passed by. But what if God was saving you from something that looked good, but wasn't right? What if the no was actually His mercy? You see, God's silence often hides His protection. He's blocking what you can't see, shielding you from what would have destroyed you. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize His quiet was the loudest form of love. Now think about Jesus in the wilderness. 40 days and nights of solitude. No food, no comfort, no company, just silence and temptation. Why? Because before He could preach to the crowds, He had to learn to stand in the silence. Before he could command the storm to be still, he had to be still himself. Even the Son of God had to endure silence to show us that silence is not the enemy of faith. It's the birthplace of power. And maybe that's where you are right now. In a quiet, confusing season. You're doing all the right things, praying, hoping, serving, but nothing's changing. You look around, and it feels like God is blessing everyone else but you. Their prayers are answered. Their dreams are coming true. And you're still waiting. Let me tell you this truth. God's silence with you is not his favor on someone else. His plan for you is yours. Your timeline is not delayed. It's being refined. You are not forgotten, you are being formed. When God is silent, it's easy to think he's far away. But in reality, he's closer than ever. It's just that his work in this season is invisible. A seed grows in silence. You don't hear its roots breaking through the soil. You don't see the moment life stirs inside it. But something is happening beneath the surface: strength, depth, foundation. The same is true for you. You may not see it, but God is growing you. If you're walking through silence, remember this: you're not the first. The disciples faced it, too. After Jesus died, there was a day between the cross and the resurrection, of the longest, quietest day in history. The day when hope seemed buried and God seemed gone. But in that silence, heaven was already preparing the miracle. The stone was about to roll away. Sometimes, the silence before your breakthrough is the sound of resurrection coming. You may not understand everything now, and that's okay. You don't need to see the full picture to trust the artist. He's painting in shades your eyes can't yet see. He's writing chapters you'll only understand when you reach the end of the story. Don't mistake the pause for the ending. God is still writing. When he's silent, hold on to what he's already said. He promised, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." He promised, "I am working all things together for good." He promised, "The plans I have for you are to give you hope and a future." If he said it once, it's still true. You don't need a new word from God when you can still trust the old one. So if you're listening right now and you feel empty, if you're tired of praying and hearing nothing, if you're sitting in the middle of your own wilderness, wondering how much longer it will last, don't lose heart. This silence is not forever. It's a sacred pause, a space where faith grows stronger than feelings, a place where trust becomes your language and surrender becomes your song. One day, when the silence finally breaks, you'll look back and realize that God was never still. He was moving the whole time, rearranging, rebuilding, preparing you for something far greater than you imagined. You'll thank him for the prayers he didn't answer the way you wanted, because now you'll see he gave you what you truly needed. You'll understand that silence was not the end of your story. It was the foundation of it. And maybe, just maybe, when someone else feels what you once felt, that heavy, painful quiet, you'll be the one to remind them, "I've been there. I know how it feels." And I promise, God's silence doesn't mean he's gone. It means he's working in ways you can't yet see. So hold on. Even when the heavens are quiet, even when the prayers seem unanswered, even when your heart aches for a voice that doesn't come, because he is there. He's in the silence, shaping your strength. He's in the stillness, growing your faith. He's in the waiting, preparing your miracle. And when the time is right, when the silence has done its holy work, you will hear his voice again, and it will be worth every quiet, tear-filled night. Thank you for listening. May this message remind you that silence is not the absence of God, it's the language of his love. He's not ignoring you. He's inviting you. He's still speaking, not in thunder, not in lightning, but in the still, small voice within your soul.